$8 trillion just moved. Quietly, strategically, without headlines screaming or politicians warning you. 8 trillion. More money than the entire economy of most nations on Earth. And this wasn't an investment decision. It wasn't diversification. It wasn't normal finance. It was positioning. The kind of positioning that only happens right before systems collapse. What makes this terrifying isn't the number. It's the pattern behind it. Because this exact maneuver has appeared before. Not once, not twice, but every time an empire was about to fall. Same structure, same silence, same ending. And this time, you're standing inside it. The biggest danger in economics isn't crashes. It's blindness. People don't lose everything because markets fall. They lose everything because they never see the fall coming. They assume stability means safety. They assume scale means permanence. They assume that because something has worked for decades, it will keep working forever. That's the illusion destroying Western investors right now. China's recent financial behavior is being dismissed as routine. Portfolio adjustments, reserve management, geopolitical hedging. Analysts reduce it to technical jargon to avoid confronting the real implication. But history doesn't work that way. Empires don't collapse loudly at first. They collapse quietly, mathematically, structurally, long before the headlines catch up. The West is trapped in a dangerous belief that economic interdependence prevents conflict, that trade guarantees peace, that global supply chains create stability, that no one would ever intentionally break a system they helped build. History proves the opposite. Interdependence doesn't eliminate conflict. It creates leverage, and leverage is always used. The problem is not that China is growing. Rising powers are normal. The problem is that the West built its entire prosperity on external dependence, outsourced production, foreign creditors, fragile logistics, debt-driven consumption, while assuming no one would ever weaponize those weaknesses. Now the math has flipped. China controls manufacturing. China controls supply chains. China holds massive foreign assets. China built alternatives to Western systems. China reduced exposure while the West increased dependence. And yet, most investors still believe this is just geopolitical noise. It isn't. This is structural risk. The kind that doesn't correct, doesn't bounce, doesn't recover. When it hits, portfolios don't dip. They disintegrate. The real problem is timing. Because by the time collapse becomes obvious, escape becomes impossible. And right now, we are far past the warning stage. There's a pattern that history repeats with brutal precision. Different centuries, different nations, different leaders. But the same structure appears every single time a dominant power is about to lose control. It never starts with explosions or chaos. It starts quietly, almost invisibly, while most people are distracted by headlines that don't matter. The most dangerous phase is not the collapse itself. It's the calm right before it. The phase where markets are still functioning, governments are still speaking confidently, and experts are still reassuring everyone that nothing is wrong. That's when the trap is already set. Every empire that fell believed the same comforting story. They believed trade made conflict impossible. They believed economic cooperation created permanent stability. They believed no rational actor would ever destroy a system that made everyone rich. And every single time, that belief became the weapon used against them. The pattern always follows 4 stages. First comes deep partnership. 2 powers become economically inseparable. Trade explodes. Wealth increases. Dependency forms. Analysts celebrate globalization. Politicians promise endless cooperation. Everything feels secure. Then comes imbalance. One side saves, accumulates, prepares. The other spends, borrows, relaxes. The shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens silently, hidden inside balance sheets and supply chains. By the time anyone notices, the leverage is already gone. The third stage is the most deceptive. Strategic repositioning. The rising power begins quietly building alternatives, new trade routes, new financial systems, new alliances, new rules, all while maintaining the appearance of cooperation, smiling at summits, signing agreements, reassuring the world. This is where we are right now. And then comes stage 4, the part no one expects because everyone assumes it won't be chosen. The collapse is triggered deliberately. Dependencies are weaponized, markets break, confidence disappears when the dominant power discovers it can't respond without destroying itself. History doesn't hide this pattern, it screams it. But most people never learn to listen. China's recent moves only make sense inside this framework. Massive restructuring, quiet divestment, resource stockpiling, alternative systems fully operational. None of this is defensive. None of this is accidental. It's preparation. And once preparation is complete, history shows us what always comes next. History doesn't warn civilizations with alarms. It teaches quietly through repetition. The same structural mistakes, the same misplaced confidence, the same belief that power once achieved can never be lost. Every fallen empire believed it was the exception. None of them were. To understand what is unfolding today, you have to step back from headlines and personalities and look at systems. Empires don't collapse because of bad leaders or unlucky events. They collapse because of mathematical imbalance. When leverage shifts, dependency hardens, and alternatives are quietly prepared. The first modern example comes from the early 20th century, when Britain stood at the peak of global dominance. London was the center of world finance. The pound sterling was the unquestioned reserve currency. British banks financed global trade. British shipping moved the world's goods, and British confidence was absolute. Germany, at the time, was a rising industrial power. The two nations were deeply interconnected through trade. British elites believed this made conflict impossible. Why would anyone destroy a system that made them rich? But beneath the surface, Germany was doing something Britain wasn't. Germany was preparing. It was accumulating gold, reducing exposure to British financial systems, and building alternative trade relationships across Europe and beyond. This wasn't announced. There were no warnings. On paper, cooperation continued. In reality, leverage was shifting. When war finally erupted in 1914, the real shock wasn't military. It was financial. Britain's banking system nearly collapsed in days. Gold fled London. Confidence vanished. The pound lost its supremacy permanently. Britain won battles, but lost the system that made it an empire. Stage 4 didn't arrive by accident. It arrived because preparation had already been completed. Decades later, the same structure appeared again, this time between the United States and Japan. After World War II, America rebuilt Japan and integrated it into the global trading system. The relationship looked perfect. America consumed. Japan produced. Both prospered. Trade expanded. Interdependence deepened. Once again, economists claimed conflict was irrational. But Japan didn't just export goods. It accumulated dollars, massive amounts of them. Instead of holding that currency passively, Japan converted it into strategic assets. Real estate, corporations, financial influence. This wasn't about profit alone. It was about positioning. By the 1980s, Japan had enough leverage to shake American markets. In 1987, when coordinated selling triggered a historic market crash, the world got a glimpse of how economic power could be weaponized. The U.S. survived, but only because of emergency intervention. Japan didn't dethrone America, but it proved something critical. Financial pressure could achieve what armies could not. The third case is even more recent and even more revealing. After the Cold War, Europe rebuilt economic ties with Russia. Energy partnerships were framed as peace. Dependency was celebrated as cooperation. Entire industrial systems were built around cheap Russian gas. Leaders repeated the same phrase: trade prevents conflict. Meanwhile, Russia prepared. It accumulated reserves, reduced exposure to Western currencies, built alternative payment systems, strengthened non-Western partnerships. When sanctions came in 2022, Europe expected Russia to collapse. Instead, Europe collapsed inward. Inflation surged, industry stalled, living standards dropped. Russia didn't win militarily. It survived economically, which was enough. 3 cases, 3 centuries, same sequence. Now apply this framework to China. From the 1990s through the early 2010s, China and the West built deep interdependence. Manufacturing migrated east. Supply chains stretched across oceans. Capital flowed freely. China became the world's factory. The West became the world's consumer. Everyone benefited. Confidence soared. But China didn't just grow. It accumulated. Trillions in reserves. Control over critical manufacturing. Dominance in rare materials. Logistics. Ports. Processing. Infrastructure. While Western economies became consumption-driven and debt-heavy, China focused on production, savings, and control. Then something changed. China began building alternatives, new trade routes across Asia, Africa, and Europe, new development banks outside Western influence, new payment systems independent of SWIFT, new currency mechanisms capable of bypassing the dollar entirely. None of this replaced the old system immediately. That's not how the pattern works. The old system is maintained until the replacement is ready. In the last 2 years, the shift has accelerated dramatically. Massive restructuring of foreign assets, reduction of exposure to Western debt, aggressive accumulation of gold and strategic resources, orders to state-controlled institutions to exit Western markets entirely within a defined time frame. This isn't hedging, it's withdrawal. Have you ever felt like you're living through the end of an era? It's a powerful, sometimes unsettling feeling, but what does it truly mean for an era to end? Is it a sudden crash or slow, quiet fade? Today we are taking a deep dive into the historical perspective of what happens when one chapter of human history closes and another begins. Let's start by defining our terms. An era isn't just a block of time on a calendar. It's a period defined by a dominant set of ideas, technologies, political structures, and cultural norms. Think of the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, or the Industrial Revolution. These weren't just time periods, they were entire ways of life, worldviews that shaped how millions of people lived, worked, and thought. So, what causes these massive shifts? It's rarely a single event. More often, it's a perfect storm of factors brewing over decades, even centuries. One of the biggest drivers is technological disruption. The invention of the printing press didn't just make books cheaper, it shattered the church's monopoly on information, fueling the Protestant Reformation and the Renaissance. It democratized knowledge, paving the way for the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. The world before the printing press and the world after were fundamentally different. An era had ended. Similarly, the steam engine didn't just power factories and trains. It completely rewired society. Millions moved from rural farms to crowded cities, creating a new urban working class. This led to new social structures, new political movements like socialism and unionism, new problems like pollution and urban poverty. The agrarian era, which had defined human existence for millennia, gave way to the industrial era. But it's not always about technology. Political and social ideologies are just as potent. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity that exploded during the French Revolution didn't just topple a monarchy. They sent shockwaves across the globe, challenging the very idea of divine right and aristocracy. This marked the beginning of the end for old world monarchies and the dawn of modern nationalism and democracy. Economic forces are another critical piece of the puzzle. Think about the fall of the Roman Empire. It wasn't just about barbarian invasions. It was a slow burn of economic decay. Overexpansion, crippling taxes, reliance on slave labor, and debasement of currency created an internal rot long before the final collapse. The intricate trade networks that defined the Roman world disintegrated, plunging Europe into the so-called Dark Ages, a new era defined by localized feudal economies. So, how does it feel to live through one of these transitions? It's often a period of immense uncertainty and anxiety. The old rules no longer apply, but the new ones haven't been written yet. People in the late Roman Empire probably didn't wake up one day and say, well, the era is over. Instead, they experienced it as a series of crises: economic instability, political assassinations, plagues, and foreign incursions. They saw the institutions they trusted, the legions, the Senate, the currency, slowly crumble. This period of transition is what Italian philosopher Antonio Gramsci called an interregnum, a time when the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. People cling to the old ways, while others champion radical new ideas. This conflict creates social tension, political polarization, and sometimes outright violence. Let's look at a more recent example: the end of the Cold War. For nearly half a century, the world was defined by the bipolar struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. Everything from international politics to the space race to popular culture was seen through this lens. Then, in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and 2 years later, the Soviet Union dissolved. The era was over. What followed was a period of both euphoria and confusion. Some called it the end of history, believing liberal democracy had won. But what really happened was an interregnum. The clear lines of the Cold War vanished, replaced by a more complex, multipolar world. New challenges emerged: regional conflicts, the rise of non-state actors, global terrorism, and the dizzying pace of globalization. We are still living in the ripples of that transition, still trying to figure out what the new era looks like. So, are we living through the end of an era right now? Many signs point to yes. The digital revolution and the rise of the internet have transformed communication, work, and even our brains in ways we are only beginning to understand. The post-Cold War global order seems to be fracturing, with the rise of new great powers and a resurgence of nationalism. And we face unprecedented global challenges like climate change and pandemics that demand new ways of thinking and cooperating. The feeling of instability, the rapid pace of change, the political polarization, these are all classic symptoms of an era in transition. The old certainties of the 20th century are fading, and we're in the messy, uncertain process of building what comes next. But here's the crucial takeaway from history. The end of an era is not the end of the world. It's a process of transformation. It's painful and disorienting, but it's also a moment of incredible possibility. These are the moments when old unjust systems can be dismantled and better ones can be built. The Renaissance emerged from the ashes of the Middle Ages. The modern world, with all its flaws, was born from the revolutions that ended the Age of Kings. The end of an era is a test. It challenges us to let go of what is no longer working and to have the courage and imagination to build something new. It's a call to action. History doesn't just happen to us. It is made by the choices of individuals and societies. The story of the next era is not yet written. We are the ones holding the pen. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the ends of eras. If you found this thought-provoking, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. What do you think? Are we at the end of an era? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.